year. And we are excited to work with more schools, not just charter schools, next year. And this sort of virtual moment in time also allows us to offer a lot of things online, whether it's downloadable or online trainings. And so we can really go beyond DC if we want to, but our hearts and our passions are here in DC. I keep switching the cursor. So we're going to go over in this webinar a little bit of background on stress and the nervous system, just as context and sort of biological grounding for all of us. And then we're going to go into 7 stress solutions, and we'll alternate. Well, Gabby will cover some, and I'll cover some, and then whoever's not talking will enter some things in the chat box. So again, for those of you who joined us a little more recently, we're encouraging everyone to open up their chat box and really use the chat box during this session to certainly ask questions and make comments, but also share resources, share personal examples of what we're talking about in the training, and also to, we'll be sharing some links that you can dive into on some of these 7 solutions a little bit deeper if you're interested. So with grounding for what is stress, 100% of humans experience stress. It's what keeps us alive. It's a beautiful system called the autonomic nervous system, which means we automatically do things that keep us alive. And we'll talk about fight or flight in a few minutes. So some folks also put stress in the same bucket as anxiety or depression, and it's similar. Anxiety and depression are also normal human emotions, and it's estimated that 30 to 60% of us experience those emotions, but about 15% of us are actually diagnosed medically with either anxiety or depression. And so that might require a pharmaceutical response with medicine. It might require a therapeutic response in a number of different ways. But a lot of folks are not diagnosed, so that number may be higher. But the point is, we're all on a spectrum of emotions, and stress and anxiety and depression are totally normal. And in this day and age, fairly prevalent in our current society and in our current moment in history. So while we are not doctors and we're not prescribing or applying official therapeutic remedies, what we'll go over in this webinar are social stress solutions that are non-medical that can help anyone, regardless of your other treatments or your other experiences, be they stressful or anxiety or depression, and that we'll drive home the points that the social stress solutions are what really help us the most. So moving on, just to define a little bit more, a stressor is the thing that causes stress. So stressors happen to us all. They happen to people with really important jobs like this guy, and they happen to those of us who have less important jobs. Sometimes if folks have particular identities that cause them stress, like this man in the picture is an African-American man, he might experience more stress in society as a result of that identity. But stress is actually how we react. And so that is what it looks like in our body. And we actually have a bit of a choice in how we react to the stressors that we face. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Just to show our cards, though, we believe in what we call wellness equity, which is that some of us face more stressors, be they identity related or circumstance related. Circumstance might be you're going through a divorce, you're caring for ill parents, you have small children at home, you have a terrible commute, you have a food intolerance that's bothering you. Those might be temporary things, but they make a big impact on your life. And those who have the most stress should really get more wellness resources. So that would be the equitable component of it. But in the nonprofit sector and the school sector, we tend to not provide very many wellness resources at all. So we're just trying to raise the questions of how do we get more wellness resources to the folks who need it. And I'll ask Gabby to paste in, there's a great TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal called, her book is called Making Stress Your Friend or something like that, but it's a hugely viewed TED Talk, and she's a great educator about stress, and she brings in that social piece at the end of the TED Talk as well. So I really encourage folks to watch that if you haven't seen Kelly McGonigal's talk already. Make stress your friend. Yeah, thank you. And so then medically, there's a stress hormone that our bodies naturally create called cortisol. And that is very easy to measure because we can measure it in saliva and it immediately shows up in your system. So that means you don't have to have a complicated protocol for blood draws and labs, etc. So cortisol has been very well studied over the last few decades. And what we found is that when cortisol is always elevated, like chronically elevated cortisol, means you're going to have more physical health problems, either immediately or later, and emotional health problems as well. Sometimes cortisol is actually chronically depressed, which is usually the result of trauma in someone's life. And that depressed cortisol, constantly depressed cortisol, is also correlated with increased physical and emotional health problems. So again, to just kind of speed through this, when you can manage your cortisol cycles, your stress cycles, then you actually have fewer physical health and emotional challenges. And so really the name of the whole human game of the central nervous system is we can't control our autonomic nervous system. It's automatic, but we can complete our stress cycle. We can notice when we're getting really stressed and then figure out what it is for us. What's our personal stress prescription to bring that cortisol back down? So that's really what we're after today. And I'm going to turn it over to Gabby to talk a little bit more about what stress looks like in our bodies and the different kinds of stress that we might be experiencing, the things that, cause the cortisol to spike, or the things that are causing some health problems to occur.
And one last thing, I'm just going to paste in the chat there. There's a resource, a book, Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. I hope I said that right.
Yeah.
So if you're curious to learn more about that, Susan has it right there. Yeah. And that could be a great tool for you if you're interested in learning more about that.
Fun fact, the book is written by identical twins.
That's adorable.
Go ahead, Gabby.
All right, so 3 types of stress. As Susan said, we all experience different kinds of stress, but it's kind of interesting and important to tease out which ones are occurring with you or might be occurring with others. The first one is physical stress. These are the kinds of things that are happening to your body. So accidents, injuries, getting exhausted, tired. Working out is also a kind of stress on your body. It's just a positive kind of stress. So there's some positives and many more negatives necessarily. And then there's some ways to ameliorate this, to balance, doing different exercises, balancing the kinds of exercises, resting, acupuncture. And we have another webinar that's more about kind of this physical balance. If you're curious, you can ask some more about it later. Another kind of stress is the chemical stress, which is also super important in that it's a virus or bacteria differences, allergies, toxic exposure, hangovers. We all know that. And immunosuppression. So I don't know about you, but the DC atmosphere is very tough on my allergies. So sometimes my body is under stress just because of the environment. And sometimes I notice it, and sometimes it takes me a week to realize that I've had a headache and it's because of allergies. It happens. Some ways to balance that though. Eat what and when it's right for you. Really hard to do. It's easier said than done, but starting to notice your body and understanding what's happening, that's one way to solve it. Enzymes, vitamins. I take Zyrtec every single day, and I do it at night. I realized from my allergist that if I took it in the morning, I would sleep groggily and wake up with a giant headache every night because I'm allergic to dust. So it's finding not just what is best for you, but when it's best for you too. It's tough. The last kind of stress is emotional. And this is the thing that causes 70 to 80% of health problems. Dr. Joe Dispenza helps kind of tease some of this out for us. So the emotional stress is really that idea of trauma, fear, finance. There's a long list. For me personally, getting a little vulnerable, a lot of my emotional stress comes from my family. My parents, they don't have a great relationship. So when I go home, it's a different story, and I have to find ways to balance it for myself. And so some ways you can balance it or with stress reduction strategies, talk therapy, tapping, meditation. Just recently got into meditation more. It's pretty exciting and interesting. And then this idea that we're going to talk more about is this community and social aspect. The idea that if you have a group of people there with you, or even if it's virtual, just like we're doing in this webinar, it actually helps you do better, find more solutions, feel stronger, and feel like a group of other people are there for you. So really impactful.
Yeah. And yeah, again, thanks to Dr. Joe Dispenza. If you're interested in this kind of thing, he's a New York Times bestselling author. There's lots of great podcasts and books with him. So I'll just do a quick review of the nervous system. And the place we want to be in most of the time is at the top of what's called this polyvagal ladder. It's the safe and social part of our nervous system. Hopefully it's where we all are right now. We're calm, we're learning, we are at sort of optimal arousal. We're not falling asleep, but we're not like hyper, heart racing and decision making on overdrive, no digestion, sweaty palms. Like that's fight or flight. That's when you're in a stress state where you have to make quick decisions, but you can't make long-term plans when you're in a stress state, when you're in that fight or flight arousal state. But that is where your cortisol is raised, and that is where your life is going to be saved. So if a car, remember when we drove, if a car cuts in front of you, you've got to make quick decisions to either slam on the brakes, swerve, yell, whatever, and save your life. But that can happen emotionally too. If my mom calls and starts yelling at me, I've got to figure out what am I going to do to react to that state of stress, both in how I respond immediately, but also how I bring myself down after that event, how I stop from ruminating about it over and over and cycling or spinning on a certain emotional thing, right? So it doesn't have to be just the life-saving car accident, saber-tooth tiger kind of stress. It's also the emotional piece. And then freeze is actually at the bottom of the polyvagal ladder. It's where you can do the least. You are numb. It is an extreme state that we go into for survival. You might think of possums and how possums freeze when they are under threat and they play dead because then maybe predators will leave them alone. This can also happen emotionally. We can be frozen emotionally, but of course there's no learning in this state. And what's interesting is both safe and social and freeze are part of our parasympathetic nervous system. And the fight or flight is our sympathetic nervous system. The way you can remember that is the parasympathetic nervous system is like a parachute as far as the safe and social, like it sort of slows you down, it saves your life eventually because you don't have all these health problems from elevated cortisol. So parachute, parasympathetic nervous system slows you down. But it can slow you down so much that you freeze, but that's usually just life-threatening kind of situation. So in the animal kingdom, this is really prevalent, these three states. And humans are, of course, part of the animal kingdom, but we have to learn about what's going on in our bodies in order to be aware of how to not control it, but just work with it, work with our systems. So hopefully that makes sense. If you're interested in polyvagal theory, there's podcasts, there's articles. It's a pretty recent sort of stream of brain science, of nervous system science, started by Dr. Stephen Porges, and it has real relevance in the classroom. So teachers that can really be self-aware and situationally aware where they know where they are on the ladder, but they can also identify where their students are on the ladder. They're going to be setting up a system and a classroom where there's more learning because students are feeling safe and social. One other piece on this nervous system, social is a really important word. The vagus nerve, which is where polyvagal is named, actually gathers all this information from the environment and feeds it up to our brain so that we can either secrete hormones like oxytocin and cortisol, or we can make decisions about what our nervous system needs. And the vagus nerve is partially responsible for helping us be social with other people. For example, my best example, I love this, is the vagus nerve helps drown out all of the ambient noise like a conversation happening in a restaurant by 50 people around you, so that you can just focus on the conversation you're having with the person at your table. So that's an example of the social part of our nervous system that really responds to other people. Our nervous system is helping us connect with other people, and that's going to bring us up the polyvagal ladder. It's going to lower our cortisol, and it's going to save our lives. So we have to figure out ways to stay social even during a pandemic. So Gabby, you can introduce the little boxes.
Yeah, so these are just some stress relief practices that may not be your typical mental health strategies, but are also still stress relievers, right? So start looking, maybe reading a few of them. Are there some that you already engage in? Here's your chance to start chatting in the chat box. What's something that you engage in? What's something that excites you, that put a smile on your face? What's some that you might be more curious about learning or reading or understanding? Listening and playing music, yes. Sleep. I can't tell you how much I love sleep. I love sleep. It's
Me
very
too. I've
important.
stopped setting an alarm most days if I really don't have to, and my body gets like the right amount of sleep. It's amazing how that happens.
It is pretty incredible. Exercise, laughter, friends, make time for gratitude. I love this idea of shouting out new things. New things can still be a part of your practice, right? So there's lots of different ways that all of us, even if you don't think, are practicing this. However, we also have some pushes for ourselves, right? So here is that visual again from the link at nonprofitcomfort.com/links. We encourage you to download it. If you don't have access to a printer, that's okay. You can also just write it down. This is meant to be kind of your note-taking sheet, okay? So think about all these different categories. You don't have to memorize them, but in your mind, try and note which ones are there. If you really want, you can take a screenshot. That totally helps if you'd like to take notes at the same time. And throughout our presentation today, with all the different strategies that you're finding, I just invite you to write some things down that resonate with you. At the end, we're going to try to invite you to star 3 things for 3 takeaways. Susan, did you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to say they're not all on this screen. That's about
Right.
half of them. So you can take a look. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. If you want to look at more of them, they're on that site. We have that link for you. Either way, here is a quote that might help you think about it in relation to others. So we need to learn how to practice love such that care for ourselves and others is understood as political resistance and cultivating resilience. Now, we're going to dive into the 7 stress relievers, okay? So, if there's something that really resonates with you, if there's something that excites you, go ahead, write it down. We're going to start to share some strategies. I invite you to also jump in the chat and share some things that are helpful for you, okay? Nothing is too small or too big. Aha. Thank you, Susan. Those are the books with Adrienne Mara Brown. Thank you. Susan has all the resources right there. So, wow, as I'm laughing, I don't know why I find that ironic. It's not, but laughter is such an important form of medicine. I don't want you to discredit the fact that when you put a smile on your face, whether it is fake or whether it is real, it changes the way your body is. So it strengthens that immune system and your core, getting in that little core workout. It creates endorphins in your mind, which lowers that cortisol, that same chemical that Susan was talking about. So even if you're faking it, even if right now you just decide to laugh, ha ha ha, no one can hear you, it's totally fine. You created some endorphins in your brain, right? That's pretty wonderful. Endorphins are great because they block physical pain, they ward off anxiety and depression, and they reduce the body's inflammation. So even if you're feeling stressed, see if you can put on a little fake laugh for yourself. Yes, what makes you laugh? I'm inviting you to share with us some things that are interesting or funny for you. Maybe they have to do with social media, maybe they don't. I'm a personal fan of SNL. I will watch it every single Sunday, and if there's not a skit that makes me laugh, it makes me a little sad, but there always is. There's one skit that I'd love to share as well, a good GIF, yes. I don't know if any of you have seen this SNL skit. You don't watch it now, but it is about the Amazon Echo, but for older people. They had this new one for older people. Please watch it. It will definitely make you laugh, whether or not you have an Alexa. Just making sure mine wasn't starting to talk. She did not talk. All right. So laughter is a great medicine. Yes, another SNL skit. Wonderful. I like to have like a go-to strategy. So if you have a go-to strategy at any point, make sure you have that in your back pocket and just bust it out whenever necessary. Susan, let's head over to the next practice as well. A couple more memes for you meme fans. There we go. The last one really got me though. So another skill, something that is a little bit newer for me, is spirituality and gratitude. Now, spirituality doesn't have to mean religion. It can mean religion. It could mean mindfulness. It could mean meditation. It could mean even yoga. All of these practices also have a component of gratitude, but gratitude can also be separate. The whole goal of these practices is to invoke an idea of relaxation in your body. So it's bringing your body in those stress cycles to come back and complete the cycle, or to just find yourself in that safe and social um, demeanor, right? So when we practice these techniques, whatever it is, whether it's sharing your gratitude, whether it's, being in a religious ceremony, meditation, whatever, you are calming your nervous system down. And so there is a gratitude TED Talk that Susan just posted in there. And it is really powerful to maybe watch it, because gratitude rewires our negativity bias. It rewires the negativity bias. How impactful is that? So just by being grateful, you may open up your mind, feel lighter, feel more open, feel happy, and have more content in your life and in relation to things that are happening around you. So when those stressors come, you're feeling more of that relaxed feeling and understanding the world a little bit better. Highly, highly recommend looking at that gratitude TED Talk. Now, another one that I'm a big fan of and have for a while is exercise and dance. And this is so important. Look at that visual there. 20 minutes of sitting quietly, super important, kind of like meditation, versus 20 minutes of walking. And 20 minutes, yes, might seem like a long time. However, look at how lit up your brain is. It's firing, it's working, it's thinking, the wheels are turning. It's allowing you to really like dive in. It is lit. Yes, Katie. Love it. It is lit. It's allowing you to dive in to something that you might be doing afterwards. So it's getting your brain ready and fired up. It's really effective in combating mild depression. And this is important, you could perform it by yourself. You could dance around in your home. You could put on a YouTube video and do it by yourself, right? Or just, lift weights or whatever. However, when you're doing it with someone, whether it's virtual, just like we're doing on this webinar, or someone presently next to you, you show up more often. You will go longer, you will go harder, you'll get those bangs for your buck, and you'll have more fun. So just an idea to push us a little bit. There's lots of different ways to exercise, lots of different ways to dance. Maybe there's a way you could add a little bit more in. And the next one might make you giggle, and that's okay if it makes you giggle. It's totally fine. It's the pleasure principle. This idea was actually born from Freud. He termed it in relation to the id, and then Janet Jackson decided to write a song about it. So this idea of the pleasure principle is the idea of balancing screens, intimacy, alcohol, tobacco, pot, any other kinds of things like that. So some things that might be super healthy and helpful, such as finding memes on the internet. And then also things that could be distracting, finding too many memes on the internet, right? It's a balance, and understanding where you are, where that tolerance level is at, is tough, but important to find, because it can either make us really happy and excited, or it can make us go down the path where we don't want to go down. So just knowing that there is a way to put these two or all these things together to make you feel healthy and balanced. Yes.
Awesome. Yep, well said. So I'll pick it up from here, especially since I've been talking incessantly about my birds. So vitamin N refers to our fifth social stress strategy, although of course it can also be solo, and that's nature. So vitamin N is sort of a tongue-in-cheek. It's not really a vitamin, but there's been so much research recently, and there's even a therapy practice called ecotherapy. But the research on how nature impacts our mental health, our mood, our physical health, there's just a lot more research about it now. And there's so much compelling research that experts, they decided to name it vitamin N because you really need it in order to be healthy, right? So a couple points that I want to make here that may be compelling to you, they're compelling to me. One is the research that shows that even if you can't get out in nature, actually seeing it on a picture or a video, or like that Louis Schwartzberg link that we shared with the time-lapse photography he's been perfecting for 40 years, that's okay. That actually has a similar impact on the brain. If we had time to lead you in a nature-focused meditation where we asked you to imagine your favorite tree or a place, a natural place that brings you calm, then you would actually get some benefits from that as well. So you absolutely should get out and get vitamin N in person, fresh air. But if you can't, or if you want to balance things out, do some guided meditations and or imaginings. Look forward to your next hike or vacation. Look at videos or pictures of beautiful nature, because that actually does have an impact as well. Now, that said, seeing it, like I'm looking out the window right now and I see trees and bushes in my neighborhood, that actually varies our eye depth perception and our focus of vision. And so because we're looking at screens so close up all the time, having a longer depth of vision is also really important for us. And for some reason, seeing nature happens to slow down our rumination sort of reaction, or that worrying element that the prefrontal cortex, which is really good for a lot of things like making decisions, it's also really good for sending you down a spinny path of like imagining all of the possible bad outcomes of worrying about things, right? Anybody sound familiar? So getting out in nature so that you get out of that loop can be really important. That's been really important for me lately. Walking meetings. I just set one up with a guy next Tuesday. I said, hey, I'm going to go for a walk at 4 o'clock. Why don't you go for a walk at 4 o'clock, and we'll both be on our headphones and we'll be walking together. So even in a virtual reality, virtual reality, it's like the Matrix. Even in this forced separation world, we can have walking meetings with each other. So if you work with folks, schedule walking meetings with them. If when we do get back into the world of togetherness, walking meetings are great for a lot of reasons. They're great for introverts. They're great for tough conversations. They're not great for big groups or things where you need a screen, but they're great for a lot of meetings. And frankly, we have too many meetings. So if we can use some of them to also get some exercise and get some vitamin N, all the better. Finally, Shinrin Yoku is one of my favorite Japanese phrases, along with Komo Rebi and Wabi Sabi. Shinrin Yoku means forest bathing. And that doesn't mean taking a bath in the forest. It means literally being among trees in, say, a forest or a park, because trees release enzymes and we benefit as humans from absorbing or interacting with those enzymes. And there's a lot of research now on trees, the hidden life of trees, or the overstory, or some recent books that folks are really getting into. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that trees do release gases. Their roots actually talk to each other through chemical and electronic signals, or electric, not electronic, but electric-like signals. So trees are much more sort of conscious than we used to maybe think. And then that concept of us benefiting from tree enzymes is sort of a Japanese concept that's gaining more traction in the West. And so just to show you what I've been really obsessed with lately, this is the progression outside of my dining room window in the last 48 hours of 4 eggs that I noticed on Sunday to 2 eggs that I noticed on yesterday to this morning, where the 2 eggs, I think both eggs hatched. That might only be 1 bird, but I think it's 2. And so I'm just obsessively watching the mama bird because I have this great vantage point out of my window. It doesn't get me outside except to go dig up some worms from the compost to feed the mama, or just put underneath her nest in case she wants a buffet. But I've been taking my more mindful walks and just walks around the block. I call that my commute to work, like walking around the block and walking back in the door. So whatever it takes to get you outside, looking out the window, imagining nature, seeing nature, actually being among trees in nature, do it. It's my message to you. So 2 more, and then we have a bonus stress solution. The 6th stress relief skill that we like to teach folks, and we have a whole webinar on it, and Gabby can put the link for Taisha's and my version of this webinar in. And frankly, like, it's not, you know, we weren't as smooth as we could have been with that webinar, but it's still my favorite version of it because she puts me in a cryobank tank at the end, which is what this picture is from. So you can watch me experience like 3 minutes of cryotherapy live, which I had never done before. And it's like an intense cold treatment, and she explains the benefits of it too. So that was like kind of a break that she treated me to during that webinar. So if you want to check that out and see me in a cryobank tank, or what, no, not cryobank, that's a sperm donation that I actually used to get inseminated for my own children. But a cryo tank is different. You don't need to be inseminated to get the benefits of that treatment. Talk about making yourself vulnerable, Gabby. Sharing a lot of information. So taking breaks is really important for your brain. I learned this at Playworks when we focused on recess for children, and the academic, you know, research among children having to take a break in order for their brains to coalesce information that you're teaching them is critical. But why don't we think this is good for adults? Of course it's good for adults. It makes us more productive. It, you know, if you design your break well, it brings a little bit more joy into your day. And balance, of course. You can download our break bingo card if you want some new ideas of how to take breaks. If you play break bingo and like put it on Instagram, I'll send you chocolates that look like this. The Reese's Take 5 chocolate bars. They changed these. They used to not be Reese's, but whatever. Now we have peanut butter in there. So taking breaks is a really important thing that you can do socially. You can do solo. And it's really good for your brain in a bunch of ways. And once you watch the webinar, you'll see why. And then finally, pet love. And there's a 1:30 video that Gabby will post in, that if you haven't seen it, what's it called? Oh, no, Side Effects is the name on YouTube. And it's a great video about empathy and the love of pets. But the points that I like to make about pets is that social does not have to just be with humans, right? We can be social with our fur babies. And furthermore, a lot of times the love that we have or that we experience with our dogs or our cats, especially in America, those are our mammals of choice. It's an unconditional love that we don't really allow ourselves to experience with humans, except children humans. Adult humans, not so much. So having an unconditional love experience is a beautiful thing, right? So that is something we should encourage. But then also the power of touch, that power of cuddling. You know, I don't have a partner to cuddle with. And so my teenagers sometimes, you know, let me cuddle with them, but really my cats are the ones that I cuddle with the most. So that power of touch, that purring, that, you know, getting so excited when you get home and going out for a walk with you, that dogs are so excited, like that kind of love and that kind of loving touch is really important for our mental health. There's also a ton of research about how pets are better for your health, especially seniors, because of the emotional and the physical benefits that having a pet can bring to someone who might be older. So there's a lot of research on it, but I just like to focus on that touch and that unconditional love, because it's part of the social stress reduction strategy that we're promoting. And then finally, I do want to, I'm throwing around clickers. I do want to play this video, which is just audio with my own janky iPhone filming, from former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. And Gabby can paste the full interview from the NPR show that Meghna Chakrabarti hosts, if you're interested in hearing the full interview that this excerpt came from. But I'm just going to play 1:30 of it, because he talks about the stress, how our stress system evolved, and how our loneliness, and especially in this time of social isolation, is threatening to prompt a social recession. You know, as there's a lot of talk about an economic recession, but we also have to face the fact that this moment in time could be presenting us with an unprecedented social challenge. So I'll let you listen to Meghna. Whoops. Oh no, I hope this plays. There we go.
I think, Dr. Murthy, if I may, are the very fundamental social connections that were essential for survival for most of human history until seemingly relatively recently, right? I mean, these are profoundly important things that we all need, don't we?
You're absolutely right, Meghna. We all need this, and we've needed them for thousands of years. But it turns out when we were hunters and gatherers, roaming the tundra in various parts of the world, we depended on each other. We depended on each other for protection from predators. We depended on each other for a stable food supply. You were better off sharing and pooling your food so that everyone could have a little bit each day than enduring the booms and busts of your food supply on your own. And it just turned out that we were better off together. Now, over thousands of years, that became baked into our nervous system, such that if we were separated from our tribe, it placed us in an automatic stress state, because we knew if we were separated from our tribe, we were at greater risk of either starving or being caught by a predator. And even though our circumstances have changed dramatically since those hunter-gatherer days, our bodies, our nervous systems, our biology is very similar to what it was back then. And when we are separated from people, when we feel separated, regardless of how many people we have around us, we enter into a similar stress state. Now, I want to be clear about.
So that's the end of that clip, but hopefully that was a taste. And if you're interested, you can listen to the full interview. I have not ordered that book yet, but that's next on my list. I'm trying to wean myself off of Amazon. Sorry, Jeff Bezos, you're rich enough. So I have to find the small bookstore places that I can get all my books, and I haven't done that yet. I think there's a new solution online where you can connect with local bookstores and support them. So that's my new resolution for buying books, because as you can see, I like to do that. So that, I think, speaks for itself in terms of both the history of our nervous systems as a human people on this planet, but then also a really compelling point about the present moment that we're in. And of course, he wrote the book before COVID came out, but it's well timed now that we are struggling with this, that we really focus on loneliness as something that can both bring us stress, and that we are forced to address in a new way. Because guess what? If we keep addressing our lives the way we did before, we're going to have the same results, and we live in a different world. So that's not an option anymore. So with that in mind, I want to kick it back to Gabby, because she challenged you at the beginning to take some notes and to star some things. And Gabby is also great at talking about habit change. So she can give you some tips on how to put this into action.
Yeah, so we've given you a good number of ideas, hopefully some things that may have sparked some interest, some thoughts, some next steps. So I invite you to think about 3 specific categories that might resonate with you more. Now, know that we're not going to be able to do everything. So even if you have, hey, I'm going to express gratitude to every single person in my family, that might be hard to do by the end of the week, right? If that's your next step. So think about starting with a small goal, something that's manageable, bite-sized, something that may not overwhelm you, but that also might give you a little pat on the back when you actually follow through. When we follow through on goals, it sends dopamine to our brains. It makes us want to do it again. And instead of giving yourself that big goal of talking to everyone in your family or working out 3 hours a day, which no one's doing that, so don't worry about it. You know, I invite you to really find ways to make these simple and manageable goals. Something really important to keep in mind, and we're thinking about what the habit change cycle is you have to really think about how to plan for these goals. Don't make it overwhelming, but just be realistic. If you are going to journal about gratitude, do you have a journal? Is there a pen that's by your bedside? Is that what you want to do? Yes, Susan also just posted the webinar that we've done on habit change if you're more curious about that. So be practical about it. Have the things that you need ready to go before you actually start the goal. And if you need something exciting like a new journal, go for it. Get that new journal. Make it a empowering and exciting thing to do. Another thing that's super important is knowing that you will probably relapse from this goal. It's probably going to take a back seat at some point. Something else might come up. You may not feel like it one day. And really the only thing there to do is to be kind to yourself. Know that that might be coming. And with that kindness, allow yourself maybe to reimagine that goal slightly or pick it up the next day, and know that one day does not mean that you are a failure. You can do anything that you set your mind to. Just make sure that you're finding small ways to make it feel right for you. So what I want you to do is when we sign off, not now, is to star 3 of these sections to decide what you want to do. Now, something that I have found super helpful is a check-in. So I will invite you. We've been staying in the present. Now we're thinking about the future just for a second. Either bring out your phone or get your calendar open and set yourself a reminder maybe for Sunday evening, a good check-in time, although maybe it's Monday because we have a 3-day weekend or whatever this is this weekend. Some manageable time for you, maybe 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, to just check in and say, hey, how am I doing on this? What should I do differently? Does this make sense? Let's go ahead. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Go put that check in. You can literally write goal check in, stress reliever check in, whatever. Go ahead, put that in.
I love this tool. When we did this during our teacher burnout training in December, and my reminder went off on January 12th, right? That we set it for, Gabby? Mm-hmm. That's when most people fail on their New Year's resolutions. Mm-hmm. And I had already relapsed several times, so it was a great reminder to get back on that horse.
Isn't that impressive? 12 days after the New Year's when we normally relapse. It's shocking. If you're not finished, don't worry. You hopefully have a few minutes afterwards to write down these goals and some ideas. If you are curious about learning more about habit change, again, there's a webinar in the chat for you. But also feel free to reach out. Susan and I love talking about this stuff. We really love helping people.
And so much so, I'd love to, if some of you are willing to share in the chat box, just one small goal that you made for yourself so that we can get a sense of what folks are taking away from this and proposing to do for yourselves. I would be curious if you wouldn't mind sharing, for me, it's called my brother, because when Gabby was talking about her family, I was like, oh geez, I really need to just call my brother. So that's what I would type in if I were typing. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Bailey. Getting back to my gratitude and start today journal. Love it. Anyone else want to share what one of their small goals is? Ooh, drinking glasses of water. Did you see me drinking my water during the webinar, Sarah? I'm trying that too.
I think that's something I need to work on as well. Feeling dehydrated every day, so it's time.
Oh, and my daughter brought out, when I was talking about gratitude, she brought out my gratitude jar. It's like an old salsa jar that we wrote gratitude on, and we put little pieces of paper with slips written down of what we're grateful for in the jar. And then when you get, sad or less grateful, you can go in and read the things if you need to. So we're going to get back to that too. Thanks for the reminder, Katie. Great. Well, also in this time of COVID sickness, we also just we're wrapping up here, but just wanted to remind folks that there's also an immune boosters sheet that is some similar information to this webinar. But if you're specifically interested in sharing information around how to build your immune system, most of these, with the exception of maybe essential oils or whatever, are backed by research and pretty common and inexpensive to implement. So we want folks to not just improve their physical and mental health, but specifically to resist the coronavirus. We're all going to be exposed to it at some point, and the stronger our immune systems are, the more chances we will have to resist infection or resist becoming, a carrier. So we are focusing more on some of this physical health component, but of course, mental and physical health are so tied together that that we emphasize both. And then number 5 is remembering that cycle of habit change that Gabby talked about. So that immune boosters sheet is available on the same nonprofitcomfort.com/links page. And obviously it's in English or Spanish. So feel free to pass that around, or if you want more. I don't think our immune boosters webinar is up on YouTube yet, but we'll be recording a new one next week. So it'll be up there soon, or we can come do it for your school or group or whatever, where we kind of whip through all 15 of these similar to today's 7, and we talk about the research and ask folks to share their examples. So that's all we have for today. Those of you who are with DC International, next Wednesday is our final Wellness Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about how this month of wellness webinars, yoga classes, family fit classes, and some limited wellness coaching for selected folks, how that went, and what should we do next year? What does DCI do next year to support wellness, especially in this new world order? So if you're on from DCI, parent or staff, we welcome you to join that webinar next week. That will be only DCI folks, whereas today was more open. But thanks to everyone for taking the time to join us today. If you don't follow us already on Nonprofit Wellness on Instagram, please do. And there's more, recordings and info, et cetera, at nonprofitwellness.org, as well as nonprofitcomfort.com. So I think those are all the public service announcements that I need to make. Gabby, anything else you want to say before we zoom off?
No, that's it. Follow us, chat with us, let us know how you're feeling and thinking about this information, and continuing sharing. Thank you.
Great. And we did remember to record today. So hopefully we'll be, able to download that and get it up on YouTube as well for folks who weren't able to join. But let's face it, recorded webinars, Gabby and I agree, they're not so much fun to watch. I mean, even ours. We'd rather have you here in person and interacting. So thanks for coming today, and go take a break, and don't forget to get those personal stress prescriptions in gear. So thanks, everybody. And we'll hang on a little bit in case folks want to hang on and have questions. But otherwise, go ahead and start to log off, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
I have to go check on my birds. So we can't have too many questions because they've been alone for like an hour.